Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the ATACS podcast. We are adults, we talk about cool things, and today we are talking about a video game called Pyre. This is a spoiler cast for Pyre, which I'm just going to say, give the one big warning up front. We are going to spoil anything and everything about Pyre. We have all played it, we all like it, and we're going to talk about it a lot. I am hosting this. I am Flex. Apologies in advance. I've been fighting a cold, so if you hear any sniffles or general grogginess, sorry. I am joined by hopefully some more healthy companions. First, I have with me Ryan from the Big Apple in New York. How's it going, Ryan?
It's going healthy.
All right, that's good. It's healthy. New York is healthy this time of year.
There we go.
And also with us is Nate from Wendell, North Carolina.
Hey, that's me.
That is you.
I got my flu shot a few weeks ago, so,
I did too.
All healthy all the time.
I did too, and here we are.
Well, then you probably don't have the flu.
Yeah, I feel pretty safe saying that.
Yeah.
That it's not the flu, but I'll try and avoid any loud, disgusting sniffles into the microphone. But yeah, we're here to talk about Pyre, Supergiant's latest. Their previous games were Bastion and Transistor, which I think all three of us have played all of their games. And it's interesting following their trajectory of games because they're all pretty different from each other.
Yeah, they are. I think there's definitely like a shared design ethos between all of those games.
Yeah, there's a weird, like hard to describe shared, sensibility or soul among their games, even though the particulars about them change a lot. As for the particulars of Pyre, just a quick overview of the game. It's you follow this large roster of characters that has been exiled from quote unquote normal civilization called the Commonwealth, and they have been exiled into the downside, which is some sort of prison wasteland, I guess you could call it. And they are charged with partaking in these rites if they want to return to the Commonwealth. And the rites play out in some form of weird 3-on-3 sports type thing where you're trying to shoot a ball or run a ball into a flaming pyre, which is where the game gets its name. And in between these rites, you spend a lot of time, almost Oregon Trail style or Banner Saga for a more recent reference, of traveling along the downside and talking to people and working through stuff. And that makes this a pretty story heavy game, which makes it ripe for a spoiler cast.
Yep.
A big part of why we wanted to talk about it.
It's kind of interesting too. I mean, it's almost a little tough to give an overview of the game because if you think about it, like the way that they introduce, hopefully for the listener, you've either played the game or you're looking to hear about it in some detail, but it's almost hard to describe the game because of, the way that Supergiant kind of they slowly introduce and build out this world and this story, I think in one of the best ways that they've done with their games. You start out, so you as the character are called the reader. The game kind of lets you indicate whether you're male or female, but pretty much they just call you reader throughout the whole game. And at the very first thing you encounter in the game is it basically describes you dying in this wasteland. It's like, I don't remember the exact description, but the first few lines are talking about how you're kind of like stranded, like, and out of strength.
Yeah.
And basically just waiting for death to take you. And then this convoy rolls by with these three characters, Hedwyn, Jodariel, and Ruki, and they come and basically are debating on whether to save you. And they're like, we see what he is, and we need this person to help us. So they kind of show this act of mercy to you, kind of bringing you back to life, and then they ask you to help them participate in the rites as their reader. So you kind of get a picture of the wasteland and of the characters. That's kind of your first impression of this wasteland and of these characters that you encounter. And from there it builds out as you grow this convoy, and you find your place in this kind of team, and you learn about kind of how these rites came to be. Like, the whole purpose of the rites is that so the rites are an ancient establishment, and they have their own backstory with these 8 kind of almost like demigods called the scribes. So you hear a lot about them because that's like an overarching like philosophy. I don't know, religion might be a little bit of a strong word, but it is sort of almost like
probably the closest thing you could call it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not explicitly religious, but it has that kind of structure and undertone to it.
The scribes were like definitely historical figures that people know about. But
and
sort of ascended to something greater.
Yeah, exactly. And like the whole purpose of the rites is they basically, as they were going through the downside and I guess kind of defeating the Titans or whatever, cleaning up the downside to a certain extent, they found a way for a few people to escape, basically just one person at a time. And so the rites are basically a way, they said, okay, this is how you prove yourself to choose who is worthy to escape this downside, and take our lessons, take our teachings. One of those, being, there are a lot of themes about that. One of them being mercy. Like, you hear the story of the emperor who basically abandoned his kingdom and almost died in the downside. That's like a big backstory or historical item. But then, they're like, take our teachings. And so apparently in history, they sent people back who established this kind of new government. So the old empire fell and became the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth now has like this, this philosophical connection, like they honor and respect the scribes. But there's more, right? Like, you learn that, well, Commonwealth has actually become kind of corrupt, and like a lot of the people you're working with, some of them have committed crimes, worthy of exile. But some of them have not necessarily done so. So it's an interesting, the game kind of slowly builds out, and, you learn about the characters along the way too, which is a huge part of the storytelling, I guess we'll be getting into. But just talking about the overarching structure of the game and the narrative, they do this excellent job of like expanding all of this stuff kind of slowly, like as you're progressing along this adventure. That's probably way too much detail, but I guess one thought just kept leading into another. So
yeah, this game is dense. So that's kind of how it is. Like, everything is so tied together and fits so well that everything does kind of lead to everything else.
Yeah, and I think that's one of like you said, one thing kind of led to another, but that's kind of how this game is everything. I feel like every aspect of it intertwines, and you can tell they put a lot of care into constructing this world and all of its lore and trying to make everything piece together in a way that feels like a cohesive world. Yeah. And that's something I've liked about all of their games. And I think Pyre is probably the most dense of all of their games with that stuff. So there's really a lot to dig into with all of that. I guess we've already started going down this road, so we might as well just kick it off talking about like what we thought about like the overarching story of this game and like all the setup of the world and the characters in it and all that stuff. I would say this is a very story heavy game.
Yeah, for sure.
So we might as well dive right into the big parts of it. Ryan did a good job describing the setup of it, and I think that makes for a really fascinating world first and foremost. And like I really enjoyed learning. They kind of roll it out in a somewhat text heavy way, and there were definitely parts where I was like, I don't feel like reading this book right now. But
yeah,
but I still appreciate that they had all that lore there if I wanted to read it, and I think you could still enjoy this game without reading all that lore.
Yeah,
but I appreciate that it's there.
And I'm guessing you're hinting a little bit at like the Book of Rights.
Yeah, I'd forgotten what it's called, but yeah, you have this book that like is constantly filled out throughout the game with all of this lore and backstory and everything.
Yeah, they kind of hint that you should know that stuff, but I think you could probably continue to play the game easily without. But yeah, I guess for me, I don't want to go too comparative. I mean, but I would say, Pyre, I feel like they did at least as good a job as they did with Bastion and kind of rolling out this colorful, fleshed out world, and probably better because the world is just deeper. Transistor I liked, but I felt like that world, they really wanted you to play that game twice to figure out what was going on. And with Pyre, I felt like I had a very good idea. Like I felt like I was very into that world without needing like a second playthrough. It wasn't like a vague mystery what was happening. It felt like they were kind of explaining what was going on the whole time. But in addition to, I guess, the overall setup that we talked about from, the intro of you dying in the wasteland to participating all the way up to these liberation rites where you're trying to free your allies, like, you kind of build up starting in this caravan of these three characters who you learn about. That's Hedwyn, Jodariel, and Ruki. And that's kind of where the game builds up. So you learn about these three characters and kind of their nuances. And then as you travel in this caravan, in some ways not unlike the Banner Saga, you have these different encounters and you meet these different characters in kind of an illustrated fashion. And I mean, maybe this is a good time to kick off the character discussion, because I think that is actually one of the best parts. Like, it's just a fantastic part of Pyre is like the characters. Like, obviously there are some humorous characters and there are some villains, but like even like your more well-rounded characters like Hedwyn, for example, like I really kind of like that guy. Like, I mean, he might seem a little generic and bland, and I kind of didn't spend a lot of time with him because he happened to be the first character I liberated. But like, you kind of learn that he deserted his post because he like loved this girl from another race, or he like basically loved this girl who is his enemy, and like he was exiled for it. So he kind of deserved what he got in a way, but at the same time, like he's this incredibly nice guy who kind of tries to keep your group together, and he's like the voice of reason in a lot of situations.
He's kind of like your likable everyman in a way. Like he's kind of your center linchpin or whatever of the group. He's kind of he always felt like the guy who like kept everyone else together to me. And he's likable. I definitely liked him. He was actually one character who I never sent him on a liberation rite.
Oh, really? Was it because of gameplay reasons, or?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, he was. So, okay. Here's a weird thing when I was playing is I wasn't sure if the characters we sent were going to have to play a rite. Like, I had this thought in my head, like, they might make the characters you send play a rite on the other side. So I did this thing where like I made sure to send at least 3 characters that I liked playing with and keep 3 as well that I like playing with.
Okay, that makes for a tricky balance because you only get 9 playable characters.
Yeah. So I made sure to send a team I would play with, and then the last 3 I kept were ones I liked playing with as well. So Hedwyn ended up being one of those 3 because I thought he was generally good.
He is.
Yeah.
In the right. So like he was kind of my linchpin for my final team, which I think the other I know Bertrude I never sent.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who the other one was, but Hedwyn and Bertrude were like the core of my like final team that I had.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely want to jump into some of the gameplay notes on these guys as well, because that is, I mean, that plays a dynamic, and the game kind of calls itself out on it. Like when you meet, the guy who's kind of. So I guess another thing we didn't discuss is one of the
hard thing about talking about this game is every relates to every other. So there might be a lot of back and forth here.
There's a lot.
We've already gone through a lot of things that I have thoughts on as well, but. We'll bounce back as needed. Yeah, the story kind of keeps growing and expanding. So, obviously we've talked about the rights and the liberation and kind of like all the setting. But then when you liberate your first character, the story kind of expands where basically one of your teammates who's kind of this mastermind, he's a planner who's been on the team for longer than you have. He's like, actually what I really want to accomplish here is I want, I feel like the Commonwealth is corrupt, and I feel like we're the kind of people who can make a difference.
Yeah.
So as you send your team back, it's playing into this kind of like meta gameplay element of how successful this revolution is going to be. So, and this guy, this planner, Sandalwood, he basically calls it out like that. He makes some really callous statements. He's like, well, before you send somebody back, just make sure how important they'll be to the team here and how important they'll be to the team there. He's like, he kind of like, he's like calling himself out for being very like cynical and analytical, but
I like Sandalwood a lot because he like in like he's not someone I would ever be friends with. Like he's not like a likable person in that regard, but I like how he just like he is kind of the mastermind of this whole thing. And I like how he puts all of that out there, and he doesn't really like he says some crazy things, and he just doesn't really hold back, and he says it very plainly and clearly, and you're just like, dude, you are insane, but I'm totally on board with you anyway.
Yeah, he's kind of like not a great person, but at the same time,
he's not.
Like at the same time, it's like, well, he's trying to do good. He just has some tendencies, probably because of all of his experiences, that cause him to be a little callous and manipulative. But he's not really manipulative that way in terms of like keeping secrets. But he's definitely like pulling a lot of strings, right? But he's kind of telling you that he's pulling your strings as he's doing it.
That's a good way to put it, and how I was trying to word it. It's like, he is very direct, but like somehow at the same time, like kind of trying to persuade everyone somewhat forcefully, but he's also not lying about anything.
Yeah, he's not lying, but he is, trying to turn everybody's opinions and actions towards his goal.
And it's kind of funny because that touches on one thing. Maybe I'll just touch it and let it go here in the while we're talking about characters. But one of the things that as the game goes, for the most part, I felt like, because you're kind of going through this story and you're participating, and sometimes the game, I guess, brings up like conflicts or confusions or hints that things may not be what they seem, but it's I don't know, it's not like the Banner Saga in that you're always feeling like you made the wrong decisions. Like, there definitely is a theme as you're going through. Like, for example, when you first meet your group, they're all a bunch of exiled criminals, and you kind of learn that. But, they pretty quickly, like Hedwyn, for example, I asked him, what did you do to come to exile? And he's like, I'll tell you the next time we talk. And then the next time we talked, he actually did tell me that. So, like, the game kind of builds trust, in these situations, which I did like that. But at the same time, there's always this little niggling doubt that, like, what if everything I'm doing here is wrong? Because, like, some of the characters, like, question straight out. They're like, why did the liberation rights have to exist? Like, why can only one person go back? Like, why did the scribes design it this way? So there are all these kind of meta doubts. And, Sandalwood is a really interesting character in that because, he gives you kind of, when you meet him, you kind of have some decisions to make about, like, are you going to help him? Are you going to try to help your team be successful? Or, let the other teams win? Because if the other teams win, they get to send their characters back, and they had some interesting characters as well. But like you said, he ends up being very much on the table. Like,
Yeah.
and these characters are varying degrees of on the table, but I felt like most of them, the game didn't really play too much on building up like doubts or insecurities. Like,
yeah,
he's kind of the one character who doesn't have doubts, and he's like the one who seems very self-assured on what he wants to accomplish. Which is why he kind of ends up being the quote unquote mastermind behind your whole team, because you do see those doubts with other people. And even if because I don't think you can liberate Sandalwood, can you?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, okay.
Like at the very end of the game, if you play
Okay.
him, he becomes worthy.
Okay, so only at the very end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, yeah, because the way he comes in so late. But yeah, he's one who you most likely will not liberate, and he kind of says he's like, "I'm fine if I stay here."
I almost liberated him because I was just like, "Dude, you get stuff done. Let's do it."
If we want this mission to succeed, you're the man for the job. A
lot of the other characters, like if you try and like if you select them to be liberated, like you'll see those doubts come out and be like, that like. I think everyone I liberated, I would assume pretty much all the characters, like express some kind of doubt or reservation about going back to the Commonwealth and how they have started to accept and enjoy life and the people they've met in the downside. And there's a lot of them like questioning their place in the world, and like all of them have those internal struggles. And I think that's what a big part of why this cast of characters is so fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm just going to jump in and say, because we've mentioned the Banner Saga a few times here, and I think comparing this to the Banner Saga is really interesting because they treat like people and like views about like positive or negative views of the world like completely differently.
Yeah.
The Banner Saga.
The Banner Saga is everything sucks.
Yeah, everything sucks. Everything is a downer. Like everybody's just marching towards death. Who knows when exactly it's going to come, but it's going to come. And like people are always backstabbing each other, and everybody's lying, and you get betrayed by people here and there, and it's just like everything sucks, right?
Yeah.
It is funny because, and that gets to what I was talking about with some of those niggling doubts, like. I did feel like Pyre, one of the things I enjoyed about it is although there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going on, what the plan is, what you're involved, these characters that you're involved with, but they kind of build trust. Mm-hmm. They do a really good job of building trust and making you feel like, you have a good understanding, and that, for the most part, they're not going to pull the rug out from under you. But with the Banner Saga, it's pretty much you're always doing something wrong. It's just the degrees of wrong. Yeah, you don't know how wrong your decision is, but you're like, okay, well that wasn't completely horrible. Like I only lost like 20 people from my convoy.
Yeah, that's fine. We can sacrifice 20 people.
The calculation to make. Yeah, and it sounded like you were headed, Nate, towards saying that Pyre is perhaps more positive.
It is. I think that's as much as, the characters and some of the imagery and trials of the downside are like, yeah, this place is kind of crappy and everything kind of sucks and it's dangerous. It's like, it's still generally, I feel like a very hopeful and positive game overall. And
I agree.
And all the characters are very aspirational and hopeful and looking towards something better. And even though they all start they're all exiles, they've all done something that was at least wrong in the eyes of the system, whether you think it's morally wrong or not. But they've all done something quote unquote wrong.
Yeah, they've all broken the rules.
In some ways,
those rules.
Yeah. In some ways, everybody in this game is a criminal except Tizo. Yeah,
that's true.
But they're all genuinely good people and trustworthy and hopeful, and it's a really refreshing, I guess, worldview that game presents.
Yeah, it is really cool.
Is. And it's reflected in the characters and in a lot of your enemies as well, to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the the people you play against, wouldn't even call them like enemies or antagonists because
there
you're playing
is
against them.
there is Manly.
Yeah, I was about to get to Manly, but for the most part, the people you play against, I think, are very much in the same boat you are, and they're just making the best of the situation. And I don't see them as being bad people.
Yeah, like they're adversaries, but they're not villains.
Yeah,
right?
and there are a few exceptions, but
And it might be a good time because we've kind of bounced between Hedwyn and Volfred, like kind of an early character and a late character. It might be a good time for us to kind of like give each of the characters a bit of like circle back and give each, because the cast of characters, like I definitely want to give every character at least
for sure. So let's start with Manly, who is simultaneously the best and worst character in the game.
He's so great.
He's the worst character because he is just a slimy sleazeball nobody likes, and he's like.
Do you wanna start with your kind of protagonist, or do you want to jump straight into the?
I don't think it matters. So you just go whatever.
We already mentioned Manly, but like they do he's a great character because they do such a good job at making him be so unlikable.
Yeah.
And he's like that character who has, so like we've talked about like the Commonwealth and how all of this set up for like going through the rights and stuff, like how all of it's kind of corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And Manly is kind of the character who is bought into the whole system.
Yeah, and he kind of embodies it, right?
Yeah, he kind of does. So like you kind of see the pettiness that system like promotes, where it's like he views his entire self-worth as tied to his status in the Commonwealth. So like he wants to win the rights just so he can go back to the Commonwealth and be treated like some kind of hero or whatever.
Yeah.
And like he doesn't like, so he's that stereotypical like aristocrat, like higher up, like
pompous,
like,
noble.
Exactly. Yeah. Like
he's pampered lifestyle, got away with everything.
Exactly. So like he feels it's a total affront that he's even in the downside in the first place.
Which he earned his place there because he basically was doing some corrupt dealings. Mm-hmm. He was like an ambassador in the Commonwealth, and he was doing some corrupt political things, and he basically crossed like someone who actually respected the law, or something along those lines, I think.
Yeah, and then he was like we said, he's going to use the rights to like propel him back to the high status that he wanted to be at, and like go back and like get revenge on that guy. I think he like wanted to go back and take him down because he threw him in the downside.
Yeah, it is funny because whenever you like encounter him in the games, he basically makes these like veiled threats, and sometimes not so veiled threats, and he like whines and complains. Like,
the progression of him through the game was so funny because the very first time, at least for me, the very first time you meet him, he tries to act all like proper and friendly and stuff.
Yeah,
and then
he asks you to let him win one at some point.
Basically, yeah.
And like basically the second you like don't give him any freebies and like actually
start beating him,
challenge him or whatever, or beat him in the rights, like he like his turn from like being this fake nice person to like showing his true colors is just like, all right, well, you're gonna be this guy. Yeah, you're gonna be that dude, and screw you.
And one of the things that you touched on, Nate, that I think we should mention is that whenever an exile is liberated, because only one can be liberated every few cycles, like because of the Commonwealth's like respects for the scribe's teaching, that exile comes back into like a position of prestige and perhaps wealth.
Yeah, but at least that's what people think. I don't know if there's any reason to doubt that, but yeah.
Well, and the voice is actually, he's a former
true.
exile, so it does seem like that's based on the story that whoever comes back is
there's definitely heavy insinuation that if you succeed through the rites, then you're treated very well on the other end. I guess almost in a Hunger Games kind of way is like you get thrown into this thing you don't want to do, but if you win, then you're like a celebrity.
Yeah. To the point of being like a part of the government, like immediately offered like high level prestigious positions.
Yeah.
So what are the characters in your, I guess we'll start with the characters actually in your party. I just had to get Manly out of the way because we mentioned them.
Well, and that's actually good because there is a lot of bouncing back and forth during the game. Like you meet a group of characters and then you play a couple of triumvirates that kind of, maybe antagonize them, those characters specifically. So the original Dream Team, maybe it's a good time to talk about them, is Hedwyn, Jodariel, and Ruki.
Yeah. First, real quick, I would be really curious. I meant to look this up. I'm really curious what happens. I assume this didn't happen for either of you, but what happens if Manly does get liberated? I'm curious.
Oh man!
No, I made sure that guy was not going back. That guy.
Yeah.
There were a couple, and I mean, those last missions can be really tough, but there were a couple I thought about, but Manly was not one of them.
No.
How good is this game in its characters that, like, at least for me, correct me if this wasn't this way for you two, when I faced Manly in a right, especially in Liberation right, he was like the one guy I'm like, I am not losing to this asshole.
Yeah. There's just no way that would happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I feel it in my bones. It's like he's the one person I am not going to lose to.
Absolutely.
Not only did I not want to lose to him, I didn't want him to score. I was just like, no, you are done, son.
I'm just going to slam this ball down your throat.
Oh, man. That's about right.
But yeah, sorry, that was my last aside on Manly. But yeah, our original Dream Team of Hedwyn, Jodariel, and Ruki, I liked all three of them a lot. And quick survey, pro or against Mustache?
Pro Mustache.
Pro Mustache.
I am the one against Mustache here.
Oh, jeez.
I thought it made him look pretty dignified.
Yeah.
I thought it made him look like a real, like, slimy backroom salesman who,
that too.
So how did he take it? How did so this is Ruki we're talking about, and he comes to you. He comes to you because he's a little. So maybe we should describe Ruki just a little bit.
He's also a dog man, yeah.
He's also a dog.
So he's a cur, yes, which is basically a dog man. Former smuggler, nice guy, but he's kind of a salesman of sorts. And he comes to you, and he has this little dog mustache. It's like this twirly black mustache that comes off the side of his nose or whatever. And he comes to you, and he's having some self-confidence issues. He's like, I think people are. That's great.
I just posted a picture of Ruki in the chat, which is why everyone's laughing.
He's like, I don't remember exactly how he phrases it. Is he like, I think people are making fun of me or like not respecting me? And he's like, do you think it's the mustache? And you kind of, as the character, as the reader, you have a chance to encourage him or discourage him. So it sounds like, how did he take it, Flex, whenever you told him that you thought his mustache looked stupid?
He took it fine. Like, I just told him, like, you might want to try just shaving it off. And, like, he was like, oh, okay. And then he came back and he was like, yeah, I think this can work. Like, he wasn't like, broken up about it or anything. Like, he rolled with it.
That's great.
I think he just looks kind of sleek. Like, I would not trust, like, he looks like someone I would pass, like, walking down a street and he's got, like, some street cart where he's selling, like, some fancy jewelry. And I would look at him and be like, I don't trust that you got any of that legitimately.
Yeah, and he probably didn't. He is kind of a sleazeball, but like a lovable goof also.
And he's so fast.
He is really fast.
He's gameplay wise, I man, it's hard not to connect these things, but
and that's one of the things I like about this game.
And it definitely plays into it, right? Like when you're making decisions about who to send back, you're kind of thinking, okay, which I actually made most of those independently, I would say. I was playing on normal, which isn't super punishing, so
same here. I assume we all were.
Yep.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're definitely thinking it's like, okay, do I want to send my 18 player like back to the other side?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So man, this is tough because I mean, I feel like those characters have some chemistry too, like Hedwyn, Jodariel, and Ruki, but
they're kind of the three characters that seem to know each other from the start. So like, I kind of got a sense that they had some history between them. Sure. And there was like, I could sense a camaraderie there among those three. And in some ways they were maybe like, I kind of already mentioned Hedwyn is like kind of the everyman likable character. And like, he definitely has some backstory to them, but I guess those three initial characters, they were like, all right, here's like your base characters. Like,
they're kind of the most stereotypical, I guess. It's like,
Yeah, I mean, they still have cool story to them, but a little more straightforward.
Yeah, it's like Hedwyn's your nice guy who keeps everybody friendly, and Jodariel's the big strong character who kind of like doesn't trust you at first, and then Ruki is just like goofy and cracks jokes and mustache.
Yeah, Ruki's he's your old dog, kind of lighthearted salesman type, and we haven't given. This was kind of a tough point. This is kind of a tough segue because like on one hand, I kind of wanted to talk about Barker, but on the other hand, like. We haven't given Jodariel any love, and Ruki actually, I felt like they kind of played those characters together pretty nicely. Because
let's talk about Jodariel because I think she's a really cool character.
She's also very quiet.
Yeah.
So Jodariel, this might have to be mostly you two because Jodariel was the very first person I liberated.
Right.
Okay.
So Jodariel was not around much in my game, and she was quiet to begin with. So. I feel like I didn't really get to know her that well.
Yeah, she's interesting because so she's like a former captain, and she's I guess I think it's like a transformation that happens to humans living in the downside.
Yeah, she's called a demon.
Yeah, so she's like this big, like horned. She's like a woman. I guess, but just really big and horned and muscular and scary.
Yeah, and has sort of dark features and general, like, imposing demeanor.
Yeah, she's a very grim and imposing character, yet at the same time, like, she's trusting in that kind of, like, she has these aspects to her character where she's a little bit of a mother hen. Like, you see that whenever she interacts with someone like, I guess she was called Faye in my game. I don't know if that's her true name or if she's just the Moontouch girl.
The character you name?
Yeah.
I guess they call her the Vagabond whenever I see her.
Or the Moontouch girl, is the one I see.
You get to name her one of like 8 different things that are 3-letter words that the second 2 letters are AE.
Yeah. They all rhyme pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Jodariel kind of, you see a little bit of a mother hen side to her, and you know that she was kind of like one of the things she was most proud of as a captain, I think, was kind of training people on and taking care of people on this battlefield called like the Blood Front or something like that, or the Blood Border. The Blood Border.
Blood Border, that's it.
Yeah. But then at the same time, like, she's kind of, she's like a trustworthy character, like a pillar of strength. And you see, like, when she's with Hedwyn and Ruki, like, like Ruki will do something really goofy and insufferable, and then Hedwyn will kind of like play it off in like a funny way, and like Jodariel will just start laughing.
Yeah.
So they kind of like give her this dynamic of being a stern yet like strong, trustworthy character, which I think was really well played.
For sure. Like she's definitely that like soldier archetype, very focused and like wants to protect people and make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to and all that good stuff. But she does have that softer side that comes out every now and then, and it just is really like worthwhile to see, I think. I also really enjoyed. I like used her for most of the earlier parts of the game as like my front man in the rights.
It's interesting because she's
just like this huge imposing figure.
She was one of my least favorite to use, which is actually one of the reasons I liberated her first.
She's so good early on, at least. I
just thought she was so slow.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that was my pinch. Like I enjoyed the faster characters more, but I felt like when the orb got to her, it was like I just can't get to the thing.
I had mixed experiences with her, although I ended up actually liking her for the rights. But there was one other thing about Jodariel's character, which we may jump into a little bit later. But she hates Pamela's guts.
Yes.
At least to start with. So maybe when we talk about Pamela, we can give Jodariel a little bit more light. But yeah, she can be a little tough to talk about just because she's kind of the quiet,
it's
soldierly type that takes care of things in the background.
It's weird to me that you would send her like first, just because you missed so much of that interaction with with the harp.
With Pamela. Pamela just straight up calls it. She's like, "Yeah, they're probably going to
Wait,
send you first."
You're talking about the harp lady?
Well, no, I was kind of alluding to how Joe Dariel hated Pamela.
Okay, yeah. I was just saying, I think her name was Pamitha.
Pamitha, you're right. Pamitha.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, when you first said Pamela, I was like trying to think of who that was. I'm
Sorry, I misremembered that.
I guess you.
No, that's okay.
I guess you get Pamitha before the first Liberation.
I think you get
I forget
almost
who the
all of
first-
the characters before the first Liberation.
Yeah,
Most of them, yeah.
Yeah, that first
maybe
Liberation takes a while to
Bertrude.
come.
Yeah, I think you have all your characters except maybe Volfred and Bertrude.
Yeah, maybe that's right.
Yeah, I think that is right.
Okay, so you would still have seen her interact with Joe Dariel then.
Yeah, just not as much as you guys probably did.
Yeah, because they definitely do not like each other, which is because Joe Dariel was a
war.
soldier in the army that fought the harp, whatever
Right, that makes
empire.
sense.
So before we jump to another character, or another of your party, do you guys want to jump to Barker or one of the? Because he kind of plays
I guess
off.
we might as well.
Sure.
He plays off against Rookie, so it might be a good time to touch on one of those characters and bounce back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Barker is a heavy metal rock and roll goth dog, and he is the best boy.
Yeah, the best boy.
Wait,
He's
was
just
that
like-
a thing? I didn't catch that.
I don't know.
Okay.
I just love that. Like,
I love Barker.
yeah, he's so great. And Nate posted this image in our channel back when we were playing Pyre, of Barker. Like, he was talking to like one of the people who run. I guess it might have been The Voice. I don't know.
I don't remember.
But he's like, I don't give a bother for your sacred mountain, so you take it and you shove it.
Yeah, he's just yelling everything.
Yeah, and I love how he just like he's totally the mad dog, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He
Like,
does not. He doesn't care about being liberated. He doesn't really even care that much about winning. He just wants to do stuff and like party hard.
That dog just wants to have a good time, man. But yeah, he's like totally decked out and like he's got skulls hanging off his collar.
Yeah, like a spiked collar.
Yeah, his spiked collar, and he's got like all these like things through his ears and like just chains hanging from him. Like he's totally this like rock and roll dog who's just like.
And every time he's in the scene, his music is this heavy metal amazingness.
Yeah, which is another great thing about this game is that all the characters have a theme. Like Manly's is like you hear his and it's like, oh, like I'm at some like stupid aristocratic party or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, Barker's is totally just like this rock and roll, like ready to go theme. And like every time he'd pop on screen and that music start playing, I'm like, all right, something's going down. Like what are we
let's
doing?
do this. This is gonna be great.
Yeah,
So,
he just I like him because he's just this force of chaos. Like everyone else is like trying to figure stuff out or like get something accomplished or whatever, and Barker's just like, no man, I just like freaking playing orb sports.
Yeah,
because it's fun. And
he was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, and he's just like he's like the one character who's just very invested in the now and just like I just like doing things like he's that proverbial dog who just likes chasing a bone because it's fun.
Yeah, and he doesn't even care when he loses. He's just like, all right, whatever, next time.
Yeah, he was one of the ones who I was like, well, if I lose to him in a liberation, right, like it's kind of a bummer, and he kind of is a trash talker, but like he's also kind of fun. So it's like I won't even be mad, but like he also kind of had some. He also had kind of had some bad blood with Rookie. Like he kind of had Rookie tied around his paw or whatever.
Yeah, I want to know now what he says if he gets liberated.
Yeah. I need to go find a video and just see like what all the people who didn't get liberated, like what it's like when they get liberated. Yeah, but Barker's just a fun time.
He is.
Yeah. Although I do remember and that's one of the things that was kind of interesting too, is some of your characters actually have connections with kind of the enemy triumvirates or whatever they're, and like, so actually throughout or during one of the missions, like I actually put, like the first time you play, Ruki's like, don't put me in against Barker.
Yeah.
Like he
he's like
terrifies me.
Barker. Yeah.
Well, and apparently he cut a deal. So he like owed Barker money. So then you kind of like, you play him again and he's like, all right, I need to face this. He's like, so he kind of shows his teeth a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And Barker's like, they kind of square things up.
Yeah, all those interactions between all of your characters and all of the, adversary teams, just they bring out so much more depth and backstory to everybody involved because it's all so intertwined. It works really well.
Yeah, I actually liked that aspect of getting story and backstory and stuff better than reading the book. I really liked the interactions between the characters and bringing out all the themes and stuff more than I did reading the book a lot of the time. So like I really liked when they leaned into that more.
Mm-hmm. The book is a little tedious sometimes. It's a lot about the scribes and the like lore of the world, and I don't know. I didn't get as into that part of it.
Yeah, a lot of times they just give you one page at a time. And I think partly that's because they're introducing things. They don't want you to get too far ahead of the current story, and that's partly probably also because it can be like towards the later part they unlock a lot of pages, and if you just sit down and read a bunch of those, that can be
get a little tedious.
I think the next two characters you meet after the original three are the vagabond girl and maybe Tizo.
I think it's Tizo, yeah.
So Tizo's the best. He like, I love the little touch they have. So he's like this little imp who has always lived in the downside. Mm-hmm. But like he doesn't speak whatever language everyone else speaks. So like his little voice sample is always this like, like this little chirpy kind of thing. And like the text is translated similarly, like it's just a bunch of nonsense. But like the way the game works, when you scroll through text, like it has that thing where like certain keywords are colored, and you can hover your cursor over it, and it'll give you some backstory. Because again, this game has story crammed in its story. And
yo dog,
but for Tizo, it's like this gibberish that you can't understand. But then you hover over it, and it'll be like, oh, it seems that Tizo is expressing excitement at the upcoming rite or something. It'll be like some interpretation of what he's saying, and I think that's just a really fun touch for Tizo.
It is, especially because it doesn't just translate it like a quote. It's like, oh, I think he's saying this.
So there's always a little bit of ambiguity to it, but it's like it kind of conveys this like feeling you have when like you kind of understand your pet or something.
Yeah.
So it's like you're never 100% sure because you can't communicate directly with them, but like you kind of have that feeling, which I thought was really charming. And I liked using Tizo in the rights too. Like he's fun.
I didn't like him for the rights, but
he can fly, man.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
And I mean well, so the rights, I had mixed feelings about Tizo. I didn't like him at first, but then I did like him as far as gameplay goes. But yeah, he's kind of a fun character. One of the things I wanted to say though that you touched on is you can kind of intuit what Tizo is saying, but one of the things about your character as being a reader is you can obviously read text, but you can also read the stars, which are part of the rites. Like when the stars start shining a certain way, that will lead you to the rites, and only readers can apparently do that. Mm-hmm. And then you can also kind of read people. Yeah. So when people are thinking things or saying things, like it's not 100%, and I guess people can protect themselves against it, but you kind of have this ability sometimes to intuit or sense, like, so that's partly how you communicate with Tizo, is he communicates in his chirpy imp talk, and it's like you hover over so you can see what your reader is kind of getting out of that. Yeah. Like if he's tired of hearing manly talk.
Yep. Aren't we all, Tizo?
But
go ahead.
I was just going to say that even though I didn't particularly like using Tizo in the raids, I actually legitimately think that like all the main characters are useful, and they just have different like ways of thinking about them. So Tizo is like, I'll fly around kind of slowly, but then I can explode and like take out a bunch of people at once.
Yeah, I actually rarely use Tizo's explode. Like for me, Tizo was the one who, because you use that little zip.
Mm-hmm.
So like Tizo is one of the ones that I felt like I could like zip around the outskirts really quickly, and then if people started coming towards me, I could fly over them and get that final distance.
Yeah.
So Tizo was kind of like one of my, like someone else would advance pretty far along the field, and Tizo was kind of my finisher a lot.
I think when I started getting to the point where I was trying to learn how to use Tizo, I had gotten far enough in where it just felt like every time he was up in the air, they would just jump up and block you.
Yeah, I think AI got better at doing that as the game.
Yeah, they definitely get smarter about that kind of stuff, and so I was just never able to fly with him.
Yeah, I actually liberated Tizo like halfway through.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So,
did either of you liberate Tizo?
So
No.
Tizo was my pick for the final liberation.
Okay,
but I guess it's probably, we might as well go to this part. But so for the final liberation, you run into Oralek.
Mm-hmm.
And he has his backstory, which is kind of interesting. So he's kind of
his backstory is crazy.
Yeah.
So he was part of. So your team is the Nightwing, and the Nightwings existed well before you came down, and I guess they were on like hiatus or something. Like they weren't participating in the rights for whatever reason.
Well, it's because of what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess
what happened. Yeah.
I know Tizo was also on the original Nightwings. And Sandalwood, maybe?
And Sandalwood.
So
and then there was Oralek, and then two others, I think.
Yeah.
So Brighton, who is the voice.
Yeah, one of them became the voice.
And Erisa. And Oralek were the original. And then Volfred was kind of the up-and-comer who took Brighton's place. So the original Nightwing. So I guess the triumvirates are these teams that were kind of established by the scribes, and there are 9 of them. So they're all kind of, even though there are these characters operating within them in the now, they all kind of have a history.
Yeah.
And you as the Nightwings, you have like special favor in that you always go to the liberation rites. That's
which I thought that was a little bit of like, that was a little bit of a, I don't know, like kind of a pop out. I felt of like why, like what is special about this one?
That felt a little contrived to me too. It was just like, oh, and the Nightwings are special because they're the best. Okay.
It's not just, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, when I first saw it, it did seem like a bit of a cop out, but then when you kind of see the history of the Nightwings as well as kind of the role that your current team is playing, it does, they make that like a part of the story that you actually are kind of in some ways the villain, right? You're the deciders. Like you're always going to be at the liberation rites. Only one of the other 8 or 9 teams gets to participate against you, and then they have to beat you. Like, so the Nightwings, keep a lot of people out.
Yeah,
they really do.
I mean, it definitely explains why a lot of the other teams just inherently kind of dislike you.
Yeah,
Did
they ever explain why the Nightwings had that special favor? Or
I don't think so.
If you read the lore, so after you do your first liberation, right, you get the lore pages start opening up on all the teams you play.
Yeah.
And so I think the 8 scribes basically, they each kind of established their own teams, but then they also established kind of the 9th team, which was the Nightwings, and they basically said like, because we always need a challenge, we always need a competitor, something along those lines, that the Nightwings would kind of be appointed to be like the final challenge. And granted undue favor, like it just straight up says that. So you always get to participate. No matter how well you do, winning or losing, you're always going to be in the final.
It doesn't feel like there was a reason for it. It just feels like they kind of just happened.
Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, how it feels playing the game is it feels like they did that just so you as the player would still go to the Liberation Rite even if you lost. So like that's what lets the game have its structure where win or lose, you still go through the game.
Right.
But yeah, narratively it felt a little contrived to me. And remind me, there are the 8 like ancient scribes or gods or whatever, and if I remember correctly, the other 8 teams are all kind of modeled after or following one of those, or was that just for a handful of teams? Because like I know the team that was like the whatever race Bertrude is, like they kind of followed in the steps of the scribe that was like of that race.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forget the scribes' names, but yeah, it did seem, I think there are nine of the teams triumvirates, and I think they were all originally established by a scribe.
I think so.
It's a little tricky because I think one of them might be the Beyonders, which I don't know how that plays in, but yeah, it's a lot of the things. So the 8 scribes represent the 8 different races in this world, and a lot of your characters also represent those 8 or 9. I guess different. 8 races plus the betrayer or whoever he was, the rope. What was that guy's name?
I don't remember most of the scribes' names and stuff.
Yeah,
I have to check, but there was a 9th basically, and that's kind of a. But yeah, so a lot of things in the game are tied to kind of the 8 races and the 8 scribes, plus 1 in some cases.
Yeah. But I guess wrapping it back a second because we got on tangents as this game kind of promotes. Orlek was basically selected to be liberated, and Arisa, is that her name?
Yeah. So circling back to what happened with the history of the Nightwing.
Yeah, she team. Orlek is like in this beam of light ready to go up, and she basically like runs in, pushes him out of the way, and tries to take his place, and she gets incinerated. Incinerated or whatever. She just, because she broke the rules, she just gets murdered. But Orlek in that got pushed off a cliff, right? And then like messed up and crippled, and then he's just super bitter about it the entire game.
And the rest of the team thought he was dead too.
Yes.
So the team disbanded because of this incident where 2 of their people died, and it was from a betrayal and all this bad stuff.
Yeah, that basically left Volfred by himself, and he's like, I have no faith in this. Like, I don't know why this happened. So rather than reestablishing the Nightwings for like a long hiatus, he chose not to, which basically meant that nobody got out.
Yeah.
Because if the Nightwings don't show up, then nobody goes home.
Yeah, so I guess when the player steps in at the start of the game, it's sort of, just like restarting the rights, and they had been dormant for a while? Is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah.
Volfred. So at that part in the game, they just call him they call him the lone minstrel who hangs out with you. He's another interesting character.
Yeah.
But, he basically calls Volfred his client. So they call him Sandalwood and the client. But at that point, he's trying to restart the Nightwings.
Right.
So it's kind of his doing, but he puts together Hedwyn, Jodariel, and Ruki, gives them the caravan or whatever, the wagon, the black wagon, I think.
Black wagon, yeah.
And then kind of supports them from behind the scenes until you eventually run into him.
Mm-hmm.
And the Nightwings basically are kind of being reborn, and it's so he can, he's kind of had time to reflect on what has happened, and he's like, I think, the way the system is and the way the Commonwealth is flawed. We need to actually try to do something outside of, the bounds, basically.
Yeah.
Start a revolution.
Oh man, this game has so many good things to talk about.
This game's so dense.
We haven't We haven't
Yeah,
touched on Sir Gilman. We haven't
Yeah.
talked about.
Yeah, let's go ahead and, I guess, somewhat quickly. I mean, we've kind of mentioned a lot of them, but the rest of your party members, yeah, there's Sir Gilman, who's like a fish dude.
I think they're called worms. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
but yeah, he's a knight. He can swim.
Yeah.
yeah, that race.
He loves you all.
He loves
Is really funny. And Sir
Yeah.
Gilman, at first, when I met Sir Gilman, I thought he was kind of a generic, chaotic, kind of goofy knight figure, but and sometimes he kind of fits that, but he
does.
You get the sense that the Worm Knights, in some ways, are almost like a lesser race.
Yeah.
So they kind of try to compensate for it by being, by searching for honor, and that.
And they're very brash and like in your face about their bravery and all this stuff.
Yeah, and
Sir Gilman's like always screaming.
aside from his accomplishments, he's like you said, his dialogue is always great.
And he's like, and we had talked about this game being positive. He's probably like the most like bluntly positive character in the game. He's just constantly
everything is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aside from his "This Knight Loves You All" and his huzzah, like he has is the way he talks. He's like, I assure you that this knight's appearance of cowardice is merely an illusion for the moment.
Yeah, he's a fun character.
This knight does not wish to burden you with any more troubles, but since you asked, here are the troubles you requested. He's just always throwing out some like goofy. I guess he's talking about himself in the third person. Something about it.
Yeah,
makes it hilarious.
Yeah, he's really charming. And then the vagabond we kind of talked about a little bit. She's interesting. Yeah, she's like some kind of like even I got the sense even when she was living above, in the Commonwealth, like she was always kind of an outcast, and she just kind of fills that outcast role.
Yeah.
But she kind of finds, like, during the course of the game, she kind of finds her own peace and like her. Was she exiled for her because her religion was not like the norm? Is that why she was exiled?
She was exiled because basically, they called her Moon Touch, which is basically like. It's basically like, she's either a lunatic or she's got like a mental issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Which she's definitely a quirky character, but you get the sense that she's very clever and like very in touch with, the teachings of the scribes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it was. She finds a lot of like personal peace in those teachings.
Yeah, she really reflects on those a lot, and like as much as she can be kind of a quirky, goofy, childlike character, she is that like constantly, I guess wise is probably the best term for it. Like she definitely just takes things in and like filters it through her beliefs and then is like, okay, I'm good with this.
Yeah.
She also teaches Tizo a thing or two about eating mushrooms.
Yeah.
And let's see, who else in your party have we not talked about?
So
Bertrude we talked about a little bit.
You meet Pamitha probably next.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
And Pamitha was a character. I'd like to get your guys' take on this a little bit because, she was a character. I liked pretty much all of the party members, but I had the hardest time kind of figuring out what was going on with her, and I never resolved. I don't know if it was possible to resolve the issues between her and her sister, but like,
I guess it depends on what you consider a resolution.
Yeah, I feel like I got the most resolution you could get with that.
Yeah,
I liberated her pretty early, and her sister was the one I played against in the liberation rite, and she actually. So in that liberation rite, she actually. Like reaches out to you and she's like, if you can hear my thoughts, like please let my sister go in my place. And which I didn't know because I was like, she hates the Commonwealth. Yeah. Like she would probably try to destroy it. Like
so. Well, yeah. So this was actually. So I actually really like Pamitha because this was like I thought her relationship with her sister was really interesting. Anyway.
Yeah.
and I think the way they conveyed of like they kind of bicker at each other, but you could also sense that at least Pamitha loved her sister and wanted the best for her, even though it was like a tough situation.
Yeah, and they had this long ongoing feud, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was probably the one I got the least out of, because it sounded like she had betrayed her sister, and her sister basically, Tamitha never, there was definitely some bad blood, and I didn't get to see it play out. So
from what I remember, and I don't remember all the details about this game because there are a lot of them, but Pamitha did something that, and I don't get the sense it was super intentional, but she did something that basically betrayed Tamitha, and if I remember correctly, that's kind of the reason they're both down here.
Yeah.
In the downside.
I think that's right.
And Tamitha basically resents Pamitha for it, and Pamitha feels bad about it. And that's when she reaches out to you in that liberation rite. And that was actually one of the turning points for me in like my understanding of this game, of like in both its structure and its like thematic elements, is that like, oh, okay, like there are legitimate reasons why people would not want to win a rite or a liberation rite. And this one was kind of a selfish reason, but that's like, this was kind of the spark that got me to look at like, oh, what are all the reasons that everyone's down here and may want to get liberated or may not want to get liberated? And like that was the moment that like clued me into like everyone's trying to find their own purpose or happiness or whatever. And like for Pamitha, it made her more happy to see Tamitha become liberated than to have herself be liberated. And I only lost one liberation rite the entire game, and that was the one I lost, is when I played against Tamitha's team, and Pamitha reached out like that, and I said, okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
And I let Pamitha go back up.
So how did that...
You mean Tamitha.
How did that play out? Like,
Tamitha freaking... When all the people that get sent back up, when they're like, going to overthrow the Commonwealth, Tamitha freaking went back to her people and roused an army, and like they were the bulk of the force that overthrew the Commonwealth.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess...
So she did work.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure, like, sent her back if she would lead a revolution or she would just burn things to the ground.
Kind of both.
Yeah, I got the sense it was going to be pretty violent if she was involved.
Yeah, it was, if I remember correctly, it was violent, but she also, like, worked with your people.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least in an uneasy way.
So,
yeah,
that's good to know. I mean, that's one of the things also, like you said, you were talking about sending Hedwyn back early. Like, you do kind of lose these characters. And I mean, these characters are, obviously, like we've been talking about, they're interesting and important. And especially those first couple characters. I mean, it's such a big deal because it's like, you have this team of specific people, and like, you have to make a choice to like give that first one up or those first two up and like kind of spend the rest of the game without them.
Yeah. So mechanically, I just want to say that Pamitha was my star player.
Pamitha can also fly.
She's the best.
Yeah, she's really good.
That's funny. She was good. Like,
she was the last one I liberated. So I did end up liberating her, and she was the very last one I liberated.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. But that was not against the True Nightwings. That was before. Was that before? Did you end up playing against Orlek?
Yeah, that was that fight. Yeah.
Oh.
When they give you the choice at the very last liberation, right? You can send one of your characters back. You can send Orlek back, or you can send yourself back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was the one where I chose Pamitha to go back.
Okay. You chose Pamitha, Tamitha's sister.
Yeah, Pamitha's the one that's in your party.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Tamitha, I had already sent back way earlier.
Okay. I see.
Yeah.
That makes sense now. Yeah.
Sorry, it's a little confusing with the Pamithas and the Tamithas.
Yeah.
So you didn't? Did you choose Orlek or Pamitha or yourself?
I chose Pamitha.
Okay, so I chose Orlek.
Okay.
I chose myself.
That's hilarious. So we had
so how did it go choosing Orlek or yourself?
Would you like to go first, Nick?
I wish I could remember the specifics and know exactly what was different about it because I chose myself. I feel like it probably just changed that end game narration a little bit to be like, you were there and you participated in all the stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember anything specific being like crazy about me being the one going back.
Okay. Was there any particular reason you chose yourself to go back?
So when I got to the final one, I was trying to figure out who I wanted to nominate. And I don't remember how many people you have left at that point.
I think if you win every liberation right, you would only have 3 left for that final battle.
So I think I had 4, and I remember the 4. It was Volfred, Sandalwood, and Tizo, and Bertrude, and Pamitha.
Okay.
And so I was like, Tizo doesn't care. He's from here. Like he doesn't need to go back. Right. And kind of the same thing with Bertrude. Like I felt like she just didn't care.
Yeah. I feel like of all the characters, Bertrude is like. I felt like Bertrude actively did not want to go back.
Yeah,
to a certain extent. Yeah.
So those 2 were out, and then I was like, well, I could said Pamitha, but I gave her a chance earlier, and she forsook it, like against her sister, right?
Uh-huh.
So I was like, I'm not going to give her another chance.
Okay.
So then I picked Volfred to nominate for the last liberation right, and I was like, well, he can go back and like organize the resistance since this is the last one, right?
Right. He kind of doesn't care either, though.
Yeah, he kind of doesn't care, but my thought was just like, he's probably the best person to lead the actual resistance.
Yeah, I think he felt like his work was in the downside. That like,
yeah, he did
doing what he did in the downside, like that was his role
for sure.
They hint kind of strongly that even though he can go back, like it's also he's content.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I didn't pick him because of him. I picked him because I just had this thing in my head that I was like, well, if I have to pick one person, he's probably
the best.
Yeah,
that's legit.
So then when that right happens, and then you can choose between the person you nominated or Orlick or yourself. I was basically like, well, Orlick's a jerk. I don't want to send him back.
Yep.
And then Volfred was basically like came up to me and was like, you need to go, like, leave me here. So I was like, all right, I'm going.
That's pretty good. Yeah. I ended up I had Pamitha at the end as well, and I sent her, but yeah, I was kind of curious it felt very selfish to send myself, and it felt like, I don't know, for some reason I felt some like, I don't know what the right word is for it, but
I mean, I agree that it feels kind of like the selfish choice.
It felt, I guess it felt like the reader, like you as the reader had like found your place and purpose in the downside. Sure. And like, it felt weird thinking about the reader going back to the Commonwealth. Like, what would they do?
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I stared at that screen for a good long while.
Yeah, I did too.
It's also interesting too, kind of the mentality that you're at that point in the game, like you said.
So what was it like for you sending Orlick back?
So he basically, it's kind of funny. Well, and you guys remember this because it's like, so I had chosen Tizo and won, and so Tizo's like, and you know, and I guess the lone minstrel's there, and he's kind of explaining what's going on because it's like the fountain almost kind of sputters out.
Yeah.
And then it like kind of goes wide open and they're like, okay, anyone can go back, but the winner has to choose or something like that.
Yeah.
I think is basically what he says.
It was,
Orlick's.
That was also a little contrived, but yeah.
Yeah, it was. But I guess it was kind of like a final act before and Orlick is kind of bitter about the whole thing the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, the game kind of puts you in, I mean, not necessarily puts you, but the way that things are going and, you know, kind of the acts of mercy and like the friendships along the way, it definitely is like a very positive thing. And it's kind of like you said, at that point I had liberated everyone else except for Tizo, Volfred, and Bertrude. And like you said, they all were willing to stay.
Yeah.
And I felt like my character, kind of like Flex said, was kind of willing to stay. And it's like, you know, Orlick kind of didn't deserve his break, even though he was being a total jerk about it.
Yeah, I think that's the one like really clear argument for sending Orlick back is like he earned it already and like got screwed. So like
he is the tragic character of this game. Like he's
Yeah.
the one who like did all the right things at first and got totally screwed out of what he wanted. And spends
He's literally left to die.
And left to die. And he spends like the entire game trying, like being bitter about it and trying to, in his mind, correct that.
Yeah.
And just like never catching that break unless I guess you give it to him at the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of neat too, because like whenever I chose him, so I chose, Tizo was going to go, and then it kind of broke out, and it's like, okay, you can choose whoever, and Tizo, of course, I guess whoever you pick, they'll choose you. They'll be like, okay, and that was kind of neat. Tizo's like, squeaky, you should go back. But and Orlick's like, are you kidding me? He's like, you guys can keep just picking each other. He's like, I'll take it. So I chose Orlick, and he's like, very well, I accept your mercy. And then he goes back, and he actually like, he kind of participates.
Okay.
That's awesome.
And he becomes like a state.
Start, busting heads.
Yeah, he becomes like a state physician, because that was his backstory, is that he was actually, he like bandaged Tizo's horn. He was a healer.
Cool.
So yeah, that was a pretty cool, it was kind of neat the way like, it's totally legitimate to blow him off, because he doesn't do you any favors. Like he just makes things hard for you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like at that point in the game, like it kind of puts you in a mentality where you're like, okay, this guy didn't deserve what he got, and like I have the ability to choose to give him a break.
I mean, I think picking him is definitely like the ultimate merciful move.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like justice served finally. Whether or not he still deserves that justice is a different matter, but
right.
I think that's a totally legitimate option.
Yeah. Do you fight him in a liberation rite earlier in the game or not?
Not a liberation,
I remember you fight
right?
against him at some point, but I guess it's just a regular rite.
Yeah, he kind of
maybe
jumps
so.
you.
So he has some story points where he kind of intimidates you, but I think like one of the teams don't show up.
Yeah.
And it's like an quote unquote unfortunate accident.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like,
he's kind of a bully.
He is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like really sleazy stuff.
Yeah.
And that fight is really hard.
The fights against him and his team are the hardest fights in the game.
I lost the one liberation rite against Tamitha on purpose, and the only other fight I lost was against him the first time he kind of jumps you.
Yeah,
because I just could not figure out how to fight against him. Like, I didn't do any like restarting fights or anything. Like, I decided at the beginning of the game that I wasn't going to do that. I was just going to take whatever lumps I got.
That was a thing.
Yeah. But that was the only one that I legitimately lost.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the last player character we haven't talked about, we can touch on quickly, would be, was it Bertrude?
Yep.
Yeah.
Bertrude.
The second best character in the rights.
Yeah.
What was that?
I said the second best character in the rights.
She was probably my superstar, but she was my
definitely
favorite.
one of my A players.
But it's kind of funny because when they first introduced her, I was actually a little disappointed because it was like she just kind of shows up, and I was like, man, that's like the weakest introduction of all the characters that you meet. And she's this like really abrasive, like she's this basically like swamp witch who kind of threatens you.
She's not the friendliest person.
Yeah, then she ends up being like kind of endearing in a horrible snake witch way.
Yeah.
She's not like a friendly person in the sense of like, just giving pleasantries and all that kind of stuff. So that's what does make her come off as abrasive. But I also got the sense that like she does care about what's going on and she will help people.
It's just everything she says is layered underneath like 15 layers of like weird mysticism and
threats. And like before you meet her, because she's one of the last characters you get, you kind of hear other people talking about her. I felt like,
Well, don't you meet her earlier in the game or go to her shop or something?
Yeah, she outfits your black wagon to sail or fly or something like that.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of weird that they introduced her and she like helps you and then she doesn't actually join your party until like hours later.
Yeah, I guess that's part of the weakness is like, because a lot of the characters I don't know, I guess they're tied to some lore. Like, when you meet Sir Gilman, you're on the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of dealing with this cowardly officer, Sir Deluge.
Yeah.
And they're all like when you meet Pamitha, she's got the bad blood with her sisters, and that whole race is basically at war with the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
When you meet Volfred, he's the mastermind of the plan. Even Faye, like you meet her, and she's like very quirky and like childish, like so they, and then like you said, you meet Bertrude, and she's someone you've already met who kind of like grudgingly helps you. And it takes a while for her to warm up as a character and like for them to, because then she starts doing things like you see that she sort of has affections for Volfred. And, like when I sent Sir Gilman back, I ran into her in the black wagon and she was like chanting like a minor spell to like help him out. And she basically makes the sideways comment. She's like, yeah, don't think I'm doing this because I like him. This is just to help Volfred's plan.
Yep.
And he's like, the Wormkin are like distant kin of like the Bog people. She's like, but a distant cousin is still family.
Right.
So she makes these like kind of funny sideways comments that, like you said, kind of indicate that she's, she's kind of I guess caring, like in a evil swamp witch kind of way.
She's like the hermit who like kind of doesn't want to interact with people and like kind of just wants to like, I don't know, do her weird alchemy or whatever on her own and just not bother with people. But then like I also got the sense that like she did care and like she was going to help if she thought she could make a difference. And I guess in that way it makes sense that like she wouldn't join you the first time because like she is kind of that hermit, but then like eventually she comes around.
I don't think that is like a strong negative or anything. I just thought it was a little strange.
It was a little strange in the context of like
because when she does join you, she just kind of walks up and is like, "Hey."
Yeah, it's like, "Hey, let's go."
I'm
Bertrude.
It's definitely a weaker introduction than most of the characters.
But she's so good in the rights, I don't care.
Yeah.
She is definitely she's pretty amazing. Like I use her giant like aura cast.
Yeah, it just sprays everywhere.
It's like strategy of mine is like move her forward, aura cast until all the normal AIs kind of get wiped out, and then just run in.
Yeah, she could kind of just clear the field, especially because you could get the upgrade that made her attacks go through walls, and it's just like overwhelming power across the whole field.
Yeah, I really liked her aura thing, and like she was definitely a stalwart of my team. She's fun. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, and as we kept saying, like things intertwine so much with this game.
Yeah,
that just kind of happens. But we are going to take a quick break here, and then when we come back, we're gonna touch on. I have some questions for you guys that I've been cooking up while we've been talking. So I think I got some things we can run through and kind of tie up the things we haven't talked about. So. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and wrap up the spoiler cast about Pyre. So stay tuned, and we will be right back. Welcome back to our special ATACS edition podcast. This is our Pyre spoiler cast. So if you don't want to be spoiled by Pyre, get out. Take the place for you. I am Flex, joined by Ryan and Nate, and we're going to continue
Hello
talking
again.
about all things Pyre. And we spent a lot of our pre-break talking about all sorts of lore and characters and stuff that happens in the world of Pyre.
And we barely covered any of it.
Yeah, and I feel like we've talked about like 6% of what's in this game.
Yep.
This is a big and dense game.
Yeah.
But we did spend a lot of time talking about characters, and during the break we mentioned we wanted to just give a few shout outs to a few of the, I guess, maybe more side characters. My shout out is I want to talk about the voice who narrates your rights, and I forget what his character's name was before he became the voice. But his like
it's Brighton. Brighton is the
name. There we go. Yeah, and as we talked about before, he used to be part of the Nightwings, but yeah, his whole persona of like narrating the rights is just,
it's such a good performance.
It really is. Like, he, in some ways, I almost consider him to just be like the core of like the energy of this entire game.
Yeah.
Like he kind of like when you get to a right and you're going through those motions, like he is really like pumping you up, and like he is so enthusiastic about the rights. Like he is so like into this entire, like everything that's going on, and he like he has this weirdly like high pitched, almost like nerdy voice, and like just the way he talks and the words he uses, and like the excitement behind the way he says it all. He's great. He's just so into it.
Because for the first while, he functions mostly as just like your sports commentator guy, but he's just like being really enthusiastic and excited about everything, like you said. Yeah. Then he also kind of takes a turn towards the end of the game, where he really does not like your character at all, because you're playing
and I think
Revolution.
Yeah, because he realizes you're going for that revolution, and I get the sense that he likes the rights so much that he doesn't want to see them end. So he seems to just be against everything you're doing by the end of the game.
Like, he has some really good lines when you are still winning towards the end. And he's just like, "Oh, the Nightwings win again."
Yeah, you can hear his
Unfortunately.
I mean, there's a lot of good performances in this game, but I think he is like far and away like the best voice performance in this entire game.
Probably one of the best voice performances in games. Like, I can't. Like, he sells so much of like the emotion and the world, and just like everything that we've been talking about is all wrapped up around these rights, and he is the personification of the rights.
Yeah, like we've talked about a lot of characters and everything in this game, but like the entire structure of this world is centered around the rights. Like the rights are the linchpin of everything that happens in this world, and he, like you said, is kind of the personification of the rights. So like all of that stuff that we've talked about, like all this corrupt government, setting up this system that puts these exiled folks like have to go through this thing for their enjoyment or gain or whatever, and like just like this entire setup of this world is funneled through these rights, and he is like governing these, and it's insane. Like the whole thing's insane. Yeah, and like he seems appropriately insane enough to sell it, and like it's just great.
And he also just gets even more excited the more like intense the situation is. So like the liberation rights, he's just like way more into it, and it's just like I just like everything about that character.
Yeah, he might be my favorite character in the game.
Yeah, he just makes it punch like right when the stuff is amping up, and like you hear his voice come on, and anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. I didn't fall in love with him as much as you guys did, but it was pretty entertaining, and I also like the way that, on kind of a meta note, that Supergiant likes to have narration in their games, but in this game, it would have been sort of predictable if they had made like a consistent narrator. Yeah. So it was nice that they kind of contained that to a certain part of the game. Yeah. In a very relevant way, but like you said, he's enough of a commentator that it doesn't feel like an obvious extension of like a Bastion, where you basically have a narrator telling the whole story.
Right.
And he really like the Liberation's rights can be really epic, and he really brings that out.
He does. He's a big part of those big moments for sure.
I thought definitely. That we were friends.
Is he the only character with? Is he the only character with English voice acting? I think he is.
He might be.
Yeah, because they speak in like Latin or something, or it's probably not
it's
really.
Up, but yeah, it's like
it's almost like Latin or Italian.
Yeah,
except for Tizo.
he has, I guess,
he speaks Tizo.
Yeah, he has imp voice acting. It's very well done, very professionally.
But yeah, the guy who does the voices, who plays as the voices, he's just awesome.
Yeah.
I think, Brian, you had another side character you wanted to shout out.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a couple I can think of, but we can't close out without giving Falcon Ron his due.
A little dude.
Like, that guy.
Yeah, so he is the shopkeeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's kind of your shopkeeper, and like, you bump into him literally at every single rite. Like, you're facing this epic journey through like storms and seas, and then, you know, climbing mountains and things like that, and your wagon rolls up and there's Falcon Ron, and he's like, "Hey guys."
And he's this little goblin dude who rides on his dad's shoulders, who's this big burly guy.
Yeah, he's like a big red ogre or whatever. Yeah, like, he shows up everywhere you are. When you interact with him the first time, it's like, if you don't, so the game fortunately gives you an option to click on him, but while you're shopping, if you don't basically turn him off, he'll just sit there and be like, hey.
Yeah.
And he's just like mumbling and like
he's
got this really nasally, slurry voice. Like, it's pretty funny. They kind of, you know, he's obviously not a central character, but they kind of weave him in. Like, one of the things we were joking about during the break is, you know, there's a part where you're traveling to a rite, and Falcon Ron shows up, and he's like, "Hey, like, you know, my dad's legs are a little sore. We need a ride, or, you know, get there on time or whatever." And so you have a choice to give Falcon Ron a ride with you, and it's like, when you mouse over the choice to select it, it's like the thought of like riding with Falcon Ron like fills you with a nameless dread.
Yeah,
he's a weirdo.
He is a weirdo, but a lovable weirdo.
Yeah,
so he's great.
He is.
Yeah, he's cool. Yeah, and that's one of the things about this game as a whole, is it just has it has those touches everywhere. It feels like no part of this game they let go without just giving it as much detail and like personality as they possibly could.
Yeah.
So like, even minor characters, or even like just looking around your wagon, like just seeing this stuff around there, like there's just so many little touches that bring this game to life.
Yep.
And I guess that's a good time to like transition to the art and the music, because as all of Supergiant's games are, like, I feel like that stuff really bring the world to life.
Yeah. And let me just jump in and say, you know, like we talked about earlier, there's so many good characters we haven't even touched on. I mean, I can name a handful more just in name, like we won't have time to discuss them, but like, you know, the Lone Minstrel and the Gate Guardian, Dalbert from the Fate Triumvirate, Sandra, like in the Beyonder Crystal, like, and you know, there are a lot of other enemy triumvirates we didn't even talk about that have their own kind of characters. So there's definitely a lot of story and characters. Like, it's no coincidence that we'll probably have spent the most time talking about characters in this spoiler cast.
We do. There are a lot of characters, though, and we eventually have to stop talking about them, or else we'll be here all week.
Although the Lone Minstrel does bust out some pretty sweet music at certain points.
Yeah, he does. They actually, like there are a handful of good lyrical songs on the soundtrack, and I think at least one or two of them kind of start as like him. Yeah, I think they're trying to play it off as he's singing.
Yeah,
his character basically prompts it. Yeah, you're starting a part of the journey, and he's like, "Hey, I think the team needs encouragement. Like, I know a song do you mind if I sing it? And if you tell him yes, like the game spins up like a lyrical soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The game's like, I guess, lead or iconic track or whatever you want to call it is called Into the Flames or something like that.
Yeah.
In the Flame. And I think that's the one he sings as you're like on your way to like one of the final rites, which is a really cool song.
Yeah.
I think the soundtrack as a whole, it's again, like I've loved all of Supergiant soundtracks, and I think this one hits again. Like they do a really good job at like fitting the mood and the vibe of the world. And I think this soundtrack's probably their most varied soundtrack because we were joking about it earlier, like with Barker and Manley, but like almost all of the characters kind of have their own theme that pop up when they show on the screen. And I think like that music really like sheds even more light onto their personality and stuff. Like, you get that rock song for Barker, and
it does kind of promote an emotional response from you as you're playing. Like you'll hear the theme, and then they slide on the screen, and then like that split second before when you start hearing the music, you're like, oh, it's this guy.
Yeah. And like my personal favorite theme in the game is actually Orlek's theme, and it's just like super epic.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also have a handful of like lyrical songs like that in the Flame song, and like I really like the song that plays during the Liberation Rites.
The Liberation Rites song, those two,
which is called Never to Return. Those two are really good.
The two harmonies. That's one thing that I definitely agree that Supergiant has great music. And I guess it's Darren Korb who does a lot of the
and Ashley Barrett, I think is her last name. She does a lot of the vocal. So any of the female vocals is usually her.
Yeah, and like to me, the harmony tracks like are still like my favorite song from Bastion. Although that game has a lot of great music, is still basically the final theme.
The credits song.
That song's really good.
Setting sail, coming home, and like in this one, like I mean, the music is great and it fits a lot of the characters and stuff, but those harmony tracks, like for I don't know if you hear it at the intro, the Into the Flame, or it's just kind of the game's general theme. But
it's the first song on the soundtrack, amusingly enough, but I think the only time I remember it happening in game, at least, was near the end, and it's as you're flying across the land towards one of the last rites. That's when the minstrel sings it.
So it's actually not even in the game that much, but the Liberation Rite song, you do hear that one quite a lot. And the way those harmonies hit, great. And they have the lyrics about I guess about the different themes in the game, like the team, like three threads will break apart, but three will form a braid or something like that. They have all these cool lyrics that kind of fit with the game's themes. They do a really good job of making like those kind of thematic, and the harmonies are just great. Like it's so memorable. Plus, like you said, the first time you hear the Liberations Right song, the lone minstrel and his kind of like, it's kind of vague, but his like celestial companion, the gate guardian, they're the ones singing. You can still, she's like, you still know how to play that, right? Like, of course. And then they just like start spinning up the music while you're playing this high stakes match. It's they just really nail that kind of.
They really do. And then all the characters, like I'm sitting here, like even in my head right now, like I can hear Sir Gilman's theme, which is like super, like it's kind of like a piratey theme, and it's really like upbeat. And then like I can think of Bertrand's theme, which is like
weird,
it's very like eerie, like bog, like it definitely makes you think of like snakes in a bog or something like that. Like it's this very like creepy, poisonous theme. And it's like they imbue a lot of personality in that stuff. And then like we were saying, like the songs that they actually sing are just wonderfully timed. And then how about that art?
Like
it's
kind of funny actually. one of the things that does kind of strike me is like, even though the downside is like this hostile wasteland,
it's gorgeous.
Kind of this bright, colorful place.
Yeah, they definitely didn't make it look like just a pile of mud. It's a really varied, intricate, colorful environment for sure.
I guess Supergiant kind of likes their colorful apocalypses or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's part of what makes it feel like a more positive game. But yeah, like it really is super colorful, and there's a lot of variety in the environments too. That like there's a wide range of things that they've drawn, and like the character designs in particular, I think are just incredible.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's kind of unique about this, because if you like the way Bastion looks, I think in terms of the general setting, there's a lot of probably shared style in terms of that colorful aesthetic. But the way they've applied that to the characters, that's kind of almost a new thing that they, not that they haven't done character design before, but they've just done so much more of it in Pyre.
Yeah, I love the look of all their like creative takes on fantasy races. Like they don't just use dwarves and elves and orcs. It's just like you got dog people, the curs, and the demons. I think look really, really crazy awesome.
Yeah, I think the demons they just look so gnarly, and they're awesome.
Yeah, and the harps,
the tree people.
Although I couldn't figure out if the harps had separate wings or their wings were actually there. I never could tell.
I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, I didn't really pay attention to that. That's
Huh.
So yeah,
we're all having a think here.
Yeah, we're all stoked. All right, we're gonna go. I'll take a break and play Pyre, and then come back. So one. All right. Probably the biggest thing we haven't even touched on at all is like, I mean, we've kind of talked about it here and there with how some of the characters play, but like the actual mechanics of the rights. I'm going to ask you all who your favorite characters are, but before that, like, how did you guys like how the rights played out overall?
I really liked it. I think it's slow to ramp up. Yeah,
I was about to say, I remember you and I, when we first started playing the game, we were talking about how we thought the ramp was a little slow.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a slow ramp on the rights as a gameplay mechanic. Like, they don't advance it quite quickly enough.
Yeah.
But when you get into those end game fights, it's like really frantic and kind of nail biting.
Yeah, definitely. Early on I felt like the AI got better as it went.
Yeah, and they're really bad at the start.
Yeah, they're kind of just dumb at the start, and also don't like the starting characters are good, but they're also very straightforward.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have these straightforward characters playing against dumb AI, and you do that for a few hours, I feel like.
Yeah.
Then once you start getting more characters and the AI gets better, it starts. I thought it got really exciting by the end, and like, yeah, you definitely have those like tense, edge of your seat matches, especially if you're playing in the way which I think the game kind of wants to be played, where you're not ever restarting rights, because then it just feels a lot more intense.
Yeah, and that was the way I played, and I had a lot of matches where like I kind of felt like I was a professional sports coach or something. Like I'm sitting here watching this match and seeing my team get taken apart for the first few plays, and I'm like, oh my god, I have to figure out right now what is going on.
Yeah.
And have to adjust my strategy.
I definitely remember doing some of that. I feel like on normal difficulty too, like the AI kind of lets you off the hook a little bit.
They do.
Because there was one match in particular, like as you mentioned, like sometimes the matches get close and sometimes the AI seemed to kind of play it out pretty tight throughout. But there was one match in particular I mentioned where the AI just dominated me for like 3 or 4 plays, which that's like.
That's a lot.
You might have 5 hits, yeah. So getting scored on 3 times means you're like in the danger zone, and then like they just stopped.
Yeah,
like
so
it's like
that too.
They had like 3 plays in a row where they just grabbed the ball or what did they call it? The orb.
The orb?
I don't know if it's just called the orb, but sure, we'll call it the orb.
Okay, so yeah, they grabbed the orb and did like this nasty running jump like straight into my Pyre, and it's like I don't even know how to stop that, and then like. You would come into the next round and they would just kind of sit there.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't.
it does feel a little uneven sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there was some intentional backing off. I don't know that they let you off the hook that much all the time, but there were definitely a couple times where I was like, I don't know if I deserve to win this, but
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Sounds like you guys enjoyed it overall, though. I mean, it's a very
For sure.
different style of combat, or whatever you want to call it, from, I guess, not only their previous games, but games in general. Like, it's a very unique system.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Like, I mean, I think for gameplay, like a game like Bastion is probably just better because you're constantly in. And to me, in some ways, I guess this is another area where it reminds me of the Banner Saga in that, you know, and I probably like Pyre's battling or combat or gameplay better than the Banner Sagas, but it's that you don't spend a ton of time in that system. Like you spend a lot of time with these characters and with the story, and you spend some time developing them in like an action RPG like sense where you invest in talents and you equip them with items, but like you don't actually spend that much time in the gameplay. And it's not, you know, I enjoyed it, like you said, and there were some tight matches, but I also feel like you don't play it often enough that you could get good at it. And I also felt like the passing could be a little bit clunky. I mean, you could tell that the AI struggled with it a little bit too, but I also found like if I was trying to, like, let's say advance a line and then pass back, the enemy AI, like any of my characters who were forward past a certain point, they would just immediately go murder that character.
Yeah.
There was like, it was very easy to just have somebody like pick off forward players, and it was hard to be strategic with that. I don't know if it's because of I'm at a slow pace of play or if it's just because of the game design.
I feel like there's someone out there who's probably like super baller at it, but I never got very adept at like coming up with intricate strategies and passing back and forth and like all of this stuff. Like my play was very straightforward of like use one or two people to like eliminate one or two of their people and then pass to someone fast and make a break for it. Like that was kind of usually my way of playing. So yeah, I didn't do a lot of passing because I never got very good at it. There is interestingly like a multiplayer mode where you can play against people and I guess potentially practice and get better at that stuff. But
yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know. Like I kind of want a version of the game where it's like play against the hardest like AI turned all the way up and just like a very standard like sports season kind of thing.
Where you kind of keep practicing the matches enough to potentially get better.
Yeah, or it's just like, well, are you going to be the best? Like, you could go through a season pretty quickly, probably, but just like, are you going to come out on top this season and then like reevaluate your lineup and then do it again and just like do that infinitely or something? I don't know if that would be fun at all, but I would kind of be interested to see something like that, just because I think you're right, Ryan, that like you don't necessarily get enough time in that system.
Yeah,
especially once the AI reaches like a higher level, there's like very little game left.
Right.
So it would be kind of nice to have a chance to like really dig into it and figure out like how do I make all these crazy strategies? Because like at the end of the game, I had only the 4 people left, and so I was trying to like figure out how to use Volfred with his weird like plant thing.
Yeah, I had the same issue. At some point I was up that like I think I liked pretty much all of the characters except for Volfred.
Yeah, he was specifically the character I was gonna ask you guys about, because he was the only, like, I liked all the characters and found good uses for them in combat, except for me, I also didn't really get into that into Joe Dariel, but she was the first character I liberated anyway, so she wasn't around much. But really, the only character who I didn't like really figure out in combat was Sandalwood, and basically the best thing I did with him is I put all of his upgrades I put into making his like plant thing bigger.
Yeah.
And I would just put that in the middle of the arena, and then I would
top of the ball.
Yeah, and exactly, yeah. And then I would like move him kind of off to the side. So like basically the plant would be blocking the middle and he'd be blocking one side, and then I would just leave them stationary and play as other people.
Yeah, that could work. You could use him somewhat defensively.
Which is what I did.
Yeah, that's pretty much what you're saying. Like, I would a lot of times put the plant right in front of my pyre or around the pyre, and then join him with it, because when the auras link up, they get bigger.
Right.
And that would just cover a ton of area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could tell the AI. I mean, it was tricky when the enemy AI did it. So I'm sure it's not trivially easy, but you could also kind of mess with the AI a bit by playing. And, you know, it wasn't necessarily a winning strategy, but it was definitely a good stall tactic. Like, if your team had been wiped, it's like, okay, put this thing on the orb, and if it grows large enough, like, you know, the enemy AI will, like, kind of have to dance around it and think about it, and, like, have a hard time, like, getting to the orb.
But yeah, I don't think he's terrible, but I think it was a case of I just didn't have quite enough time to figure that out.
Well, and Volford was another character where I mentioned that I had a little bit of a challenge with the game's, like, passing strategies.
Yeah.
And he was a character where, you know, he's really slow, and it feels like he's meant to be deliberate, and maybe almost that you could do some sort of advance him forward and pass back strategy. But then if you did that, as soon as you left him, the enemy AI would, like, aura cast on him, and he would just be gone.
Yeah.
And there was slow.
Yeah, and there was definitely, that was something I felt like, I'm not sure how well the game is balanced in terms of, you know, is it just me not being good because I haven't played that much, or is it that actually that passing mechanic doesn't reward that kind of play in, like, a tactical way? So really, like, the run and gun fast guy strategy is, you know, just safe and effective or something like that. It's kind of a balance I'm not sure if I understood or not.
Yeah. So did you guys use any of those, like, I forget what they were called, like the constellation, like, optional modifiers?
Yeah, I used a bunch of them most of the game.
Okay. Yeah.
Off and on. I tried to touch a number of them because they actually gave you some story pages about those I guess evil titans or whatever they were.
Yeah.
I definitely used the one of them just made the AI better.
Right.
And, like, I used that the whole game because it just made it way more fun.
Yeah, which is hilarious.
That was the one I was the most afraid of.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious that they've, like, even put that in there. It's like, hey, we know our AI is, like, intentionally kind of dumb, so here's how you can make it better if you want.
Yeah, and I think that's why I probably had a lot of nail biters through my playthrough, because I had most of those on most of the game.
Yeah. And I think that one, like, because I experimented with toggling them on and off throughout the whole game, and I think that AI one actually made a really big difference.
It did, and it also gave, because they all give, I think, an experience boost.
Yeah,
and that one gives the biggest bonus. So I think they recognize, like, that's a big one. Yeah,
I think that's justified because I felt like that one made it a lot harder.
Yeah, because some of them it's like
Yeeslok.
I don't remember.
He was like the character that the one of the triumvirates, the bog witches, they were, like, obsessed with him, and I think that was his constellation.
Okay. Yeah, some of the other constellations weren't that big of a deal. You would, like, start with a little less on your pyre, or they would start with a little more, or things like that.
Yeah, those I pretty much always had on because they didn't seem like a big deal.
Yeah.
All right, hard-hitting question here. Pick any 3 characters. What's your A team?
I've got mine.
Go for it.
Pamitha. Bertrude. And I don't really care. I think if I could pick anybody with those, I would pick a fast character, and I think the 2 fast characters I really liked were Ruki and the Moon Touched Girl.
Yeah.
Okay. That one's tough for me because I rotated characters a lot. But yeah, Bertha, I think almost unquestionably.
Yeah.
Bertrude, I'm sorry. I always, Bertrude. And the thing is she gets an artifact which lets her cast through obstacles.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's just so even good. More amazing.
I never took that off once I got it.
Oh gosh, it's so good.
He's nasty.
And she, like, protects your pyre. She can damage their pyre even more. Like, yeah, she's just great. Probably Ruki would probably be one of the picks. I liked his long shot, the way he kind of long shot casts and just fast guys.
And he has multi-jumps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, that's tough. Yeah, I like Sir Gilman. I liked Faye. Tizo was fine. I liked Hedwin a lot, but
yeah,
I sent him back so early. It's because he actually got skills that kind of let him just sit in the back and like make your party better.
Yeah, he had team buff stuff, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, so I almost feel like he could have been like, I didn't get a chance to play with him that much, but I almost feel like he could have been like an easy A-teamer. So you like have Bertrude, like a Rookie or Sir Gilman, and then just Hedwin in the back, like making everybody better. Yeah,
that's true. I sent Hedwin back first, so I didn't use him a lot. But I could see, if I had to pick 3 people, I could see picking Pamitha, Bertrude, and him just to get those buffs.
My very final liberation right, my team was Bertrude, Hedwin, and Pamitha.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
And they were all maxed out at that point, and they were pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my A team would be... there's obviously a clear winner here. Bertrude would be on my A team.
I don't know if there's any dispute.
Yeah.
It sounds like among us, like, he's pretty well a consensus pick.
Yeah,
I probably like Pamitha just as much, or a little more, but Bertrude's real good.
Yeah. But yeah, I would use Bertrude, Hedwin. I really liked. I think he's just like generally well-rounded and good.
Yeah.
And those buffs were nice. The third slot's actually a little trickier. Like I did really like Pamitha, but I also really like just having a fast person in that third spot. So I could even see going with like Rookie or, the Vagabond Girl.
Yeah.
So
although in those fast spots, I don't hear any of you guys vouching for Sir Gilman.
The problem I had with I like that he was fast, but I really had a hard time with his like aura mechanic.
Yeah, same. Yeah. I couldn't hit people with his cast.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't either. Whenever I put him in, and he doesn't do a lot of damage to the Pyre either. So Rookie's probably a strictly better pick. Yeah, but man, he is fast and he can jump.
Yeah, I think that's where I came down on that. Is I felt like Rookie was just kind of a strictly better Gilman mechanically.
Yeah, I felt like Gilman was supposed to be one of those more strategic characters because you could kind of cover a lot of ground with aura, but I couldn't. Yeah, I just couldn't figure out how to use it right.
Yeah, and Rookie, like his R was thin, but it was also long and fast, and like I can't remember if it was upgrades or what, but like there was something that let him charge it really quickly, and I actually got really good like later in the game of just just snapping that thing off really quickly and just like sniping people, and like I got really good with him at just like clearing a path and then running.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's another thing too about the switching mechanic is because both you and the AI can only control one character at a time.
Yeah.
And you could, the AI obviously would punish you for it, like I was talking about, especially if you move forward, but you could punish the AI for it as well. Like, especially if you had those long casts, because, if you're firing off like a long range aura, like that basically means the AI has to switch over and like move out of its way. And, that it's distracting for a human. And sometimes, the AI definitely seem to try and take care of it. But, I guess if you're in the middle of like a play or whatever, you just can't deal with stuff like that.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we'll start closing it out here with some final thoughts.
Good.
Yeah, I think if it wasn't clear, I think we all really liked Pyre. Our discussions maybe been a little scattered, but I think that's also because this game has like so many interesting aspects to it that kind of are all over the place. But I think the thing that I like, there are things that I didn't like about the game. Like, we talked about the slow ramp. Like definitely the first few hours, I was like, I don't know how much I like the rights, and like I wasn't fully bought into the world yet and all that stuff. And like sometimes slogging through reading the denseness of that book was like a little tiring. But like I think the thing like ultimately that makes me really like this game is I feel like they have fleshed out so many aspects of this game, and they've really built out such a fascinating world. And I really like a lot of the characters and the themes that this game is conveying. And I think there are a lot of themes that you could dig into. Like this feels like one of those games that you could like really dissect, like a lot of the themes going on.
Yeah, we really only discussed this here at a surface level. Like, a real critical reading of this game is like book material.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really fascinating. And I also really like the way that it, and I think this is, to me, what makes it hit so well as a game is I think the way they've tied those narrative themes into the way that winning and losing rights affects the narrative is really fascinating. And I think that leads to just like a really personal, like, I mean, we've kind of talked about the results a little bit, like the different results we got, and like maybe it doesn't change drastically, but like it makes it feel like the outcomes for your rights are meaningful.
Yeah.
And even if the like overarching plot is like, oh, you're taking down this corrupt, like religious institution that's kind of governing all this stuff and has set up all this like crazy, I don't know, scenarios. Mm-hmm. Like going the way you go through that and that your results in the rights like affects all of that, I think is really fascinating. And it works because like the game's artistically gorgeous, like the music's great, and then like they've just created such a large and diverse cast of characters that all have the things they're trying to do, and yeah, it just all of that comes together really well. And we bounce around a lot because the game's so dense, but I think what makes the game work is that it all does ultimately gel together.
For sure.
It makes like a very cohesive experience.
Yeah, and that's something I guess I would add to that is like, you know, in addition to what you're saying, and kind of one of the things we started out talking about is the way the game kind of, you know, it's able to tell that story in an effective way. And I mean, of course, the flow, like we talked about with the book of rights and things like that, may have some small hiccups, but really like you kind of get into it. Like you start out and it's like you're dying, like, and it's just a few lines of text and like it kind of shows you where you're at. Like you don't see yourself, but it's like you see where you're at, and it just talks about how you're kind of out, you know, you're out of strength and basically just waiting to die. And then from there, it kind of builds out the story, and you learn about all these things that we talked about, all these characters, you know, these institutions. What is the Commonwealth? You don't ever actually, you know, as far as I know, there's no way to see the Commonwealth, but you kind of have a very, you know, like sort of detailed understanding, at least from like a distance, of what's going on there. And so there are all these story themes that sometimes the game, you know, is just telling you through the characters, through the interactions, and like it's just a very effective form of storytelling. They just do a really great job in building out this kind of setting and story, like, you know, one piece at a time and one character at a time.
Yeah, for sure.
Is this one of those games that after I finished it, I like couldn't stop thinking about it for like another week or two?
Yeah, and I forgot to mention too, like we talked about as well, I feel like it ends in a really positive place, which is refreshing. I mean, I like my banner sagas where the world is crashing down and I'm having to make tough decisions and I feel horrible all the time. I mean, you know, there's definitely a time for that, but it's nice to have a game like this where, you know, things are kind of colorful, and I mean, it's not all happy, like, you know, they have some real concerns, but you know, it's like a faith in humanity type thing in a way.
I wouldn't say it's happy, but it is hopeful, and it is always moving towards something better, right?
Yeah, because you have this large, diverse cast of characters that all have like different goals and ideals and all that stuff, and like they've all kind of ended up in a, you know, quote unquote bad spot by being exiled. So like they've kind of all against their will taken this turn in their life, and it's like, all right, what do you do with your life in this spot? And you see how they all deal with it, and it's like they all have their own positive spin that they've dealt with it. So it's like they're you know, they're doing the positive thing. They're making the best of the situation they got, and they all find their own peace and hope within that. And it is I think it's a very positive game.
For sure.
You got any other final thoughts there, Nate?
I think you guys covered it pretty well. I think this is a fantastically creative and different and refreshing thing to come to video games. Like,
Yeah.
it's
How
just,
weird is this game?
it's so weird and so different, and it just makes me happy and makes me think like, yeah, creativity really does have no limits. Like, we can continue creating cool worlds and cool characters till the end of time, because that's what people's brains do. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. Well, if nobody else has anything to add, that might wrap it up for our Pyre spoiler cast, our condensed version. If you want, we'll have to reconvene for our week-long full dissection of everything Pyre. That's not going to happen.
No.
Yeah, this is a really rich and detailed game. We obviously liked it a lot, and we've just spent I don't know how long talking about it, spoiling it, and hope everyone enjoyed it. I am Flex, along with Ryan and Nate, and
this night loves you all.
We all love you too, Sir Gilman. And with that fond farewell, we are going to close out this special edition of ATACS, our Pyre spoiler cast. Stay tuned for next time.